This is the Ready Set Podcast, and here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Hey, what's going on, everyone? We are now live on all of our podcast platforms. Please give us a like on Facebook on our Ready Set Podcast Facebook page. YouTube, give us a like and a follow. Please subscribe to the podcast and smash that bell button. We're also available on Podcast Addict, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever else you may find your podcast, your favorite podcast, except on Spreaker and Stitcher. Never bothered to put the podcast there. Anyway, we are here for another episode this week. I'm really doing my best to try to keep it, more than an episode a week. It's kind of hard. I don't really want to go into it really much beyond that, but yeah, it's just a lot of fucking work, and I'm trying to do my best here to knock out more than one for the 3 people that listen to this thing, and I think I might have overshot my audience number there a little bit, inflated the numbers a smidge. So anyway, we got a few things to kind of discuss. I don't think this one's going to run too long, but I always say that and then they end up running an hour, so I probably should fuck up and get right to it. But first, before we do that, you know what we have to do first. This is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Are you ready? Set podcast! Alright, so another thing I kind of forgot to break into 2 podcast episodes ago, so that'd be for number 38, was the Bears announcing Mitch Trubisky as their starter. And I might have actually, now I think about, alluded to it at one point. I don't really remember. If I did, I did not spend much time on it at all. But, yep. Since then, they have played a game, which I'll get to in a second here, but naming Mitch Trubisky over Nick Foles as their starter. I'm going to be honest with you, I really don't fucking care. I'm going for the Tampa Bay Tom Brady's this year. But I found that as a very interesting decision. I mean, it's one or two things. Maybe he has taken a step forward. Or maybe Ryan Pace is just so hell-bent on making this work because he knows his future as a general manager, at least for the Chicago Bears, is hinged on this fucking pick. And, I mean, I personally don't even think Nick Foles is the answer, and I don't even really understand anyone that thinks Nick Foles would be the answer. He had one good year a few years ago in Philadelphia. That's it. And what has he done since? He went to Jacksonville and basically was replaced by that Minshew guy, Mustache Minshew. And he just basically said, I think he got injured and then was replaced and then just lost his spot. But either way, he's not the answer. Now, I could, turn this around and talk about that this just being a stopgap measure for the Bears. Really, maybe all along they did want Mitch Trubisky. Maybe all along they just needed someone to back up Mitch Trubisky just in case he falters again. So worst case scenario, they can put in a guy that will actually give them a chance to basically stay to get to the playoffs and to keep Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy's jobs alive for another year. But, what do I know? I might be just a pessimist when it comes to that kind of thinking. But that's where people tend to be led astray when really that's probably what's going on, because life is pessimistic, believe it or not. So we're going to fast forward to last Sunday where the Bears played the Detroit Lions, and I took a few notes while I was watching the game. Yes, I begrudgingly admit that I was watching the game, but it was all done for the purpose of this podcast. I know my audience is at least from up north, so I'm going to give the audience what they want. Me shitting on the Bears. Okay, maybe that's not what they want, but that's what you're going to get. So, right out of the gate, I kind of noticed that the Bears' offensive line was struggling against Detroit. I mean, again, there was no preseason, so it's really hard to say, this is in the first week, the first 4 weeks really, you're going to see a lot of ebbs and flows with teams, because basically this year, the first quarter of the season is the preseason. Or in other words, your preseason games count this year. And not only do they count, but you have to game plan and execute in those preseason games. And what's going to happen? You're going to have some sloppy football for the first 4 weeks, especially with the lack of training camps. And, most regular training camp years, you have two teams practicing against each other, a lot of scrimmaging, a lot of 7-on-7, and you really haven't been having that in this off season. And that's kind of why you got what you got this week. A lot of, I don't want to call it sloppy play, but it's if you think that's the league humming at full bore, I don't think you've been watching the league a long time. I will say, I'm not sure if it was Detroit's pass rush that was that much better, or if the Bears' O-line was struggling. Now, I will say they were doing pretty good as far as, I think at one point the run average was about the same as the pass average. So, there's definitely some steps forward taken there. And I don't think they gave up any sacks. But, just the eye, they weren't passing the eye test. I do remember there was a... Now, I want to say, so the first 3 quarters were abysmal for Trubisky. He ended the game, I think, with 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But if we're all being honest here, he should have at least thrown 2 interceptions. At least 2, which that's classic Trubisky. He always throws, usually he's in a 2-1 deficit, interceptions to touchdowns. And even if he throws 3 touchdowns, you can guarantee he threw 1 to 2 interceptions in those 2 touchdowns. The fact that he didn't actually put up 2 interceptions is because Detroit didn't catch the ball. But he basically threw 2 interceptions. And you have another situation where in one of those interceptions that he threw, he was basically staring down Allen Robinson throughout that entire slant route. I'm pretty sure it was a slant route. And the safety was all over it. The only reason it wasn't intercepted, the guy fucking dropped it. And, in the first quarter also, I was really getting annoyed with Nagy's cute play calling. Wide receiver end arounds, using Patterson out of the backfield. What are you doing, bro? Quit trying to get cute. I know that worked maybe the first year, but this is the NFL. People are looking for those. My guess is that Matt Nagy's offense isn't as sneaky as one would think it is. My assumption here is someone along the way has figured out a way to key into what Matt Nagy's offense is doing. Now, for those that don't know, in football, if you are an outside linebacker or a safety, there are certain spots that you look on the offensive line or on the offense to key what the offense is doing. For instance, if a tight end blocks down on a defensive tackle, leaving the end rusher exposed, you're supposed to look out for the fullback to kick you out for a 30 or 40 or 30 or 46, which is basically a run through the 6 hole or the 5 hole, depending on which side you're on. That tight end will tell you what's going on. Another key that safeties or linebackers look for are what the guard is doing. Is the guard pass blocking? Is he being pulled out to the left or right? That means it's going to be a sweep. Is he blocking down? Is he trapping the tackle? All these keys will tell you what the offense is doing. And my guess is there are keys that Nagy are leaving out there that clue into these defenses what's going on. And I'm not impressed with this offense, at least not for the first 3 quarters. And if I'm supposed to be impressed with them for the overall game, it was great that they were able to, Trubisky was able to make these throws that he struggled with last year. It's great that they have a wide receiver that can actually, create separation and catch these throws too. But now they're talking about trading him to the Patriots, which makes no fucking sense. Are they trying to win the season or not? And I believe by the end of the third quarter, the Bears were still like 0 for 5 in third down conversions. And that was a big issue I had with them last year. You can't win games, or you can't win games in general if you're not converting third down. Why? Because if you're not converting third down, the clock isn't moving, and you're not moving down the field, and your defense is coming out after every one of those 3 and outs, and they're getting tired. Every time. By the time they come out to the fourth quarter, even with a halftime, they can't even sustain 2 downs anymore because they're so fucking winded after bailing out the offense all year. Trust me, I speak from experience in my high school team there. I wrote down no TD Q4. So they probably hadn't scored a touchdown until the fourth quarter. same thing, what I said earlier. And this is true all the way to the end of the third quarter. The run average and the pass average were exactly the same. And then on top of that, the secondary, the secondary defense, those back four guys, back three, depending on the defense they're aligned in, it's like Swiss cheese back there. They were getting carved like a turkey by Matt Stafford. There were a few good plays that the secondary did make, but there were a lot of wide open receivers creating separation, middle routes. There were a few routes that I think that were caught across the middle and turned into big gains because, bad tackling. Again, you're not going to win games in the NFL, let alone in your division, by making mistakes like that. Yeah, and again, there's a lot of soft safety play, and I don't understand. Maybe there's something that who's the coordinator? I can't remember. Is it Bob Lazar? No, Bob Lazar. That's the UFO guy. Something Laser. That might be the offensive guy. I don't know. I should probably look that one up. Whoever their coordinator is. Oh, it's Chuck Pagano. That's right. It's Chuck Pagano. The pogo stick. Because he's just inconsistent. It doesn't work. I'll figure one out eventually. But again, I don't understand these coordinators that go into this cover 2, cover 3 soft coverage. You're basically saying take the out route, take the corner out, take the slant route. I don't get it. If you have a pass rush, maybe that's what's going on. Maybe they're expecting there to be a pass rush, so they figure they can have that soft coverage. Well, I got some news for you fucks. Akeem Nicks, Khalil Mack were no-shows. You need that fucking pass rush. I didn't hear Khalil Mack's name the whole game. I didn't hear Akeem Hicks the whole game. I heard nothing from these guys. They need to step up. They need to have a pass rush. And sure, the Bears ended up winning that game. But really, Detroit lost the game. The Bears came back, scored those 3 touchdowns. And then they basically lost it, but they basically won it because Detroit lost the game because there was everyone knows what I'm talking about. Stafford passed the ball, and the guy walked right into the end zone. The only problem is he dropped the ball as he was walking into the end zone. That was the game right there. So the Bears are 1-0, but as far as my count goes, just like last year with that fucking Denver game, I knew they were sunk. Even though they beat Denver on that last-second field goal, they still looked like shit, they played like shit, and they were shit. Just like they are this year. Alright, let's talk Chicago Cubs really quick. I don't have much to say on this. Alex Mills, I call him Millie. That comes from when Brett Favre was with the Vikings, and they had, what was that guy? Who's their fucking coach? Is it Brad Childress, I think? And Brett Favre gave him the nickname Chile. So that's what I call Alex Mills. Millie. Hey, what's up, Millie? So he threw a no-hitter the other day, and they just walloped the Milwaukee Brewers. It was like 12-0. I had the game on. I think I was watching like the Rogan podcast next to it, or maybe I was watching My Name Is Earl. Either way, I didn't even realize there was a no-hitter going through that whole thing, but I watched it. Okay. Surprisingly enough, today, I think this is right around the time Carlos Zambrano threw a no-hitter 12 years earlier in 2008 up in Milwaukee against Houston. And the Cubs, they haven't been playing horribly. They had a stretch a few weeks ago where I was like, oh geez, this is not looking good whatsoever. But the starting pitching has looked a lot better. You got guys hitting that weren't hitting a few weeks ago. Jason Hayward's been, I'm a little, I don't know if the Cubs should re-sign that guy because, look at how he's hitting now. The guy's in a contract year, all of a sudden his bat's on fire. Sounds like someone got a nice little contract and took their foot off the gas. Because if I remember correctly, the first few seasons the Cubs had Hayward, he did dick offensively. He was a defensive glove, but offensively he was doing nothing. He was not hitting not nearly to the capacity he is this year. So I'm a little skeptical on that. And I also forgot that the MLB is going with that whole 16 team postseason this year. And let's take a quick look at that. So the Cubs right now are the 2nd seed, and Philadelphia is the 7th seed. And obviously this can change on a day-to-day basis, but we're going to say the Cubs play Philly right now. How do their starting pitchers, stack up against each other? Okay, so the rotation for the Phillies, you have Aaron. I'm assuming this is based on it's the depth chart. Okay, so this is your starting 5 pitchers for the Phillies. And you're gonna have Aaron Nola, and this guy is currently sporting a 5-3 record with a 2.40 ERA and 56 innings pitched, with 77 strikeouts and a .889 WHIP. Those aren't bad numbers. Probably use a little bit more wins, though. Zach Wheeler is their 2nd pitcher. This guy has 8 games. He's 4-0 with a 2.47 ERA, 51 innings pitched, 36 strikeouts, and a 1.1 WHIP. That's all right. And then, as all Cubs know, Jake Arrieta, 6'4", 230. That's a big boy. 9 games. He's 4-4, 5.08, 5.08 ERA, 44 innings pitched, 32 strikeouts, and a 1.5 WHIP. Yeah, that's the Jake Arrieta the Cubs had before he got good. So I can tell you right there, you could see a huge drop-off between their 1 and 2 guys to their number 3 guy. Zach Eflin's their 4th guy. He's got 8 games, 2-2, a 5.01 ERA, 41 innings pitched, 52 strikeouts, a 1.45 WHIP. So that's not too much different from Jake Arrieta. The next guy, Vince Velasquez, not too much better. 7 games, 0-1, 6.46 ERA, 23 innings pitched. So he's been knocked out of a few games quick. 34 strikeouts and a 1.69 WHIP. So you can definitely say there is a huge drop-off between the Phillies 2-starter to their 3-starter. Now, we all know what the Cubs are, but out of curiosity, I just want to look at this myself. Roster. Wait, that's right. I'm going to do the depth chart. I don't know how the fuck to do this. Hold on, give me a second to figure this out. Okay, got it. So, obviously, oh, look at this. That's right, because Quintana has been injured. So the Cubs, so I guess that means they've been rotating on that 5th spot. I'm obviously not paying attention that much. So the Cubs have Kyle Hendricks, Yu Darvish, John Lester, Alec Mills. That 5th spot is open because that would normally be Quintana. I'm trying to think who's been pitching in that 5th spot since. So they must be either way. All right, well, let's just take a look at those first 4. So Kyle Hendricks, so far this year, he's been having a pretty good year. Come on, phone. I want to see his stats. He doesn't want to tell me. Oh, gotta love. There we go. All right, so Kyle Hendricks this year has had 10 games. He's 5-4. He's got a 3.29 ERA, 65 innings pitched, 51 strikeouts, and a 1.05 WHIP. That's not bad. I almost feel like those numbers don't really tell the story of how good he's been this year. But the next one's Yu Darvish. He's got 10 games, a 7-2 win-loss record. He's got an ERA of 2, 63 innings pitched, 79 strikeouts, and a .94 WHIP. He played last night. He did okay. John Lester's their 3rd guy. He's 2-2 this year in 9 games. You can see a similar drop-off here. With a 5.05 ERA, 46 innings pitched, 37 strikeouts, and a 1.34 WHIP. And then Alex Mills. He's in 9 games. He's 5-3 with 3.93 ERA, 52 innings pitched, 37 strikeouts, and a 1. So this is interesting. I actually thought the Cubs starting 5 or 4 would kind of match up better. But, passing the eye test, I want to say the Cubs probably have the advantage as far as the batting order goes. I'd give them the advantage in the starting pitching. They're probably at a deficit when it comes to the bullpen and their inconsistent closer. And then I would also give the Phillies a advantage in the manager spot because that is Joe Girardi, who I completely forgot went to the Philadelphia Phillies this year. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. You know, another thing going on in Major League Baseball is apparently the fucking the Cardinals, who are barely 500, they haven't even played as many games as the Cubs or the Brewers, aren't running for the 8th seed playoff spot, and I think they're a game under 500. So, you know, I hate the fucking Cardinals, and the fact that, you know, these guys were irresponsible and missed a bunch of games, and for some reason that is giving them an advantage. I mean, it really doesn't matter anyway because our division fucking sucks. I mean, there's us, and then all the way down here is the rest of them. So I guess it shouldn't matter. But if the Cardinals get hot and go on a fucking streak and win this World Series or beat I would be fucking thoroughly annoyed with Major League Baseball. All right, we're gonna move on from sports here. I'm gonna try to wrap this up for you in about 9 minutes. Let's talk some Uber war stories, shall we? I'll save the best one for last, but I had a good one the other day. I picked this family up, not too far from where I live, and they were going to Animal Kingdom. And Animal Kingdom is thoroughly annoying because as an Uber driver, you're not allowed to just like roll in like the buses do. You have to wait in line and say, I'm dropping these fucks off, and then they tell you to pull off to the right and go from there. So you end up wasting your time just sitting in line. And we were sitting in line, and I mean, we were kind of chit-chatting. It wasn't anything major, but it came out that these people were from California, probably heavily, they're communists, I can assume, maybe the leftists at the very least. And by just sitting there waiting in line, I was getting really annoyed because I was missing out on requests. So we start driving, we get through the gate, and we're driving towards where you go. The road splits between going into to park your car and then doing the rideshare drop-offs or pickups. And they have someone stationed there for some reason to stop the Uber drivers or Lyft drivers and ask them where they're going. Maybe it's to make sure that, you know, well, they'll tell you it's because they probably don't want any of their guests getting confused and going that way when they should be parking their cars. But really, they're just Chinese communist fucks. And I was kind of speeding because I was trying to get these people out of my car ASAP so I could get back out there, and not realizing that this guy was going to be there. So as we pull up, he gives me the like slow down hand wave, or you know, you're like kind of pushing your hands down or whatever. And I pull up to the car, and I pull the car up to him, and at this point I was fucking annoyed with this fuck. So I said, "Hello, Mr. Communist Chinese Party person," or something like that. Everyone kind of snickered and laughed in the car. I wasn't doing it for a laugh. I was just annoyed by the collective annoyance of Disney. Anyway, so I kind of mentioned as we drove away how it just feels like some of these places are like military checkpoints or military Chinese checkpoints, which for some reason prompted me to point out how Disney is a giant hypocrite. Because when Georgia passed that abortion law, however many months or it's like a month or it's like a year ago, we'll say at least, and they passed that abortion law in Georgia, which prompted Disney and other various Los Angeles production companies to say that they were no longer going to go to Georgia for those tax credits to film any movies or TV shows there. And while all this is going on, Disney was well aware of the fact that that movie Mulan that they just released on their streaming platforms was being filmed in a province in China that locks Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps up. Think about that. Out of one side of their mouth, they were talking down to a sovereign state that they don't even pay taxes in, other than the tax credits that they would get for being there for a few months out of the year. Okay? A few months out of the year. Their business isn't even based in fucking Georgia. And they're basically trying to tell Georgia, if you don't change this, we're going to sanction you financially. All the while, they have a movie being filmed in a province in China where they are literally oppressing people. So I pointed this out to the family. Yeah, Nothing really was said. I knew I was kind of on my own there. And fast forward like a few days later, I was just checking my Uber feedback stuff, and yeah, I basically got in a message there that was saying something along the lines of like, avoid sensitive subjects or something like that. And it was either, I mean, I'm always talking about crap like that, so who knows who reported it or dinged me for a star or two for saying that, but I can only imagine it was that guy's wife. Fucking leftist fucks. So, Labor Day weekend was pretty crazy here in Florida. Or Central Florida. It was probably the busiest I had seen it since this whole COVID thing started. Apparently everyone decided that Disney and Universal is the place to be for Labor Day, and that they were the only ones that thought of it. But, it's still pretty uneventful. At least Labor Day was, from having a story perspective. But what was this, about a week ago, I had a former concierge Disney employee jump into the car. When I asked him if he worked at Disney Springs, because that's where we were going, he made a quick point to note that he only took this retail merchandising job at Disney Springs because his other two jobs, the concierge at a hotel and at Hollywood Studios, had been eliminated. And what other choices did he have? So he goes on to say, in order to work at this Disney Springs retail job, he had to take a pay cut because the pay difference wouldn't be fair to his other co-workers. Now, for all of you out there that are all for communism until it negatively affects you, like this guy, I just find that really crazy. Everyone's all for communism, and then it affects you, and now you got a problem with it. Well, you want communism, you fuck? You got it. And then he also went on to tell me something really interesting, that all those parking structures in Disney Springs were paid for by the county. What was interesting, though, is he said the city, but I don't, because this was just probably, he was a younger kid, so I'm sure he doesn't realize that, there really isn't a city back there. Disney owns all that fucking land, so he probably meant the county. Now, you want to talk about corporate socialism? Let's talk about corporate socialism, because Disney's the poster child for that. So when I mentioned that I was against subsidies on either side of the spectrum, or the economic ladder, really, this fat fuck clammed up, and all of a sudden, had nothing to say. But you know this Disney employee. You do. Claims to have signed an NDA. Kinda on the queer metro side, but could have a girlfriend or boyfriend, or a boyfriend who thinks it's a girl, however that fucking goes. Has a snobbish attitude for a guy that's working for minimum wage. You know who I'm talking about. And I've been doing so many rides at Disney, I finally know how to navigate that property. And I'm watching them slowly build the Star Wars hotel. It's in a parking lot. It's next to the cast employee parking lot at Hollywood Studios. So it's hard for me let me start over. It will be very hard for me to stay at that hotel, because the magic has already been ruined. I already know that, obviously, yeah, I know that hotel is on Earth, duh. But, I know where it's situated. I know where it's located. I know that if I could see out of a window outside of said hotel, I'd be staring at basically what you'd be staring at is the back buildings of Hollywood Studios, and you'd see, those things that look like floating rocks. Well, you see the back end of them with a pole attached to them. There's no magic. It's gone. And even if I go there and I can't see out, I'm going to be well aware that I'm standing in a building next to a highway tucked in between the cast parking lot and an off-ramp that states that in an off-ramp that's in the state of Florida on the planet Earth. Crease en la magia? That's if you believe in magic in Spanish. Okay, so there's one more story I have here. This happened on Sunday night. And what it was I worked all day. I got a request around 10:30 for they wanted to be picked up somewhere in Disney, and based on what the information I was given, they were going to Orlando. It was like 24 or 5 miles to the northeast, which I just had come from Orlando, and I was just trying to get the quick fare and go home. So I ignored it, and I was just going to loop around Disney and then go home. So one more request came in, and it was same thing, about 5 minutes away in Disney property somewhere, but they were only going like 5-7 minutes northwest, which would have been Disney Springs. So I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's a quick pickup, and I'll just go home. So I go to the Riviera, which is a really nice hotel where one of the gondolas drop and pick people off at, and I had to pick someone up at a bus stop, which was an employee. And this gentleman gets in the car. I say, hey, how you doing? It's good. On the Uber, the driver app, you slide something over to start the trip. And within 2 minutes of me starting that, not even 30 seconds of me starting that trip, he updates his drop-off spot. And I looked at where the update spot was, and he changed it to fucking Orlando, like over by Universal somewhere. That's minimum 20 minutes away. So what I ended up kind of figuring out after the fact, this is after everything happened, was that first request that came in. Now, this is important for you to remember. Remember this as the story goes on. That the first request I had that came in that was going to Orlando was this guy. So he changes it. And I asked him, like, well, why did you just change your drop-off spot? And he said, it's because I was having a hard time getting an Uber. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I didn't want to fucking drive you up there the first time. So this sketch nugget, what he did is he changed his drop-off spot to Disney Springs, and it worked because I jumped on that request right away. And then when I got in the car, he changed his drop-off spot completely to somewhere else. Now, as I put the car into drive and started rolling my way through this parking lot or this hotel property, I was like 85% ready to just kick him out of the car, because I was pretty sure you're not allowed to do that. But, me, I'm a whore for money and a nice guy, sort of. So I decided to just, deal with it. So I started driving him back. And plus it was surge pricing, so I was going to make an extra $5 off of it. So again, like I said, I'm a glutton whore for money. And what ends up happening is, we're driving back, and I think we're about 5 miles out, and I decide, you know what? I'm turning the AC off. And then, so I just let the AC run. I think the windows were down or something like that. And just so you know, it's fucking humid here in Florida. So even with that nice breeze rolling through the car, you're still getting this nice film of moisture on your skin, because it's just that humid here. There's just that much water in the air at night. And then, of course, in between all this, I'm blasting the Eagles, the Goo Goo Dolls, what's that band that plays Love Stinks, AC/DC, and just so you're aware, the guy in the back does not listen to that kind of music, if you catch my drift. So we get about 1.5 miles away from the guy's house, and this is kind of where I was, after the fact, left a little perplexed. So let me back up really quickly here. So as he updates his drop-off spot, I asked him about that. I'm like, why did you do that? And he said, so I can get an Uber faster. And I told him, I said, hey man, I wouldn't have taken this request had I known you were going that far north, because I just came back from fucking Orlando. He didn't say anything. He just kind of dealt with it. But I'm smart enough to know, okay, this is kind of where this is how I get to that conclusion. Someone that acts like that is deceptive in that way, there's probably more going on as far as that deception goes. Meaning, he's probably more aggressive than he leads on to be. And he probably doesn't like people talking to him that way. Was I talking down to him? Who knows? That's for him to decide, and for you to decide if you were there. But that's really not what the point is. The point is, he, looks at me as I'm just a dumb Uber driver. You know what I mean? And he gets shat on, and, he figures he can just turn around and shit on me. But he didn't say anything. but I was smart enough to know that if he was smart, he wouldn't say anything because I just kick him out of the car. So, I don't know. I guess I'm Monday morning quarterbacking this a little bit. So we get about a mile and a half from this guy's house, and he starts mumbling something in the back, and I had to turn on the music because I couldn't hear him. And it was one of those things that kind of crescendoed, where it was just kind of talking, and it just got louder and more aggressive as every word he spoke went by. And essentially the message was that if he wants to, he didn't, these are my words, he didn't say it like this. This is basically what he was saying, that is if he wants to act shady, change his drop-off spot, and do whatever he's got to do to get his shit done, he's gonna fucking do it, and there's nothing I can fucking do about it. And there was a lot of N-words, there were a lot of F-words, there was a lot of stuff like that going on. Or sorry, not N-word, No, there were no N-word. Well, okay, scratch that. He was calling me the N-word, but it wasn't in like a racist fashion. It's just probably how the guy talks. Fine, I get that. So when he got really, he started the apex of the crescendo was him screaming at me that he can do whatever the fuck he wants, whenever the fuck he wants, and that I'm just an Uber driver, and that I have to listen to everything that he says, and that I'm gonna drive his ass home and drop him off. Well, this is where he made a serious miscalculation, because while he was in the midst of this yelling rant, I was slowly pulling the car over to the side of the road, and I think that's when he was like, "And you're gonna drive me home?" And I turned around and I said, "Actually, you're gonna get out of the car now." And then this must have been something he did not anticipate happening, because from that point it turned into just uber aggressive into a racist uber aggressive rant. It cracker this, salty cracker that, pasty this, cracker pasty that, cracker this, cracker that. I mean, if we were put the shoes on the other foot here, and I was using the N-word, and many times that he was using the cracker word, I wouldn't have an independent contracting job anymore. Now, he also started to kick my ass a few times, Now, again, in the moment, I really wasn't scared, because I guess the way I looked at it is, if he wanted to kick my ass, I hadn't even turned around and looked at him yet. So he had multiple opportunities to just deck me in the side of the face, which wouldn't have ended well for him whatsoever, because I would have probably taken the cord out of my iPhone for the Apple CarPlay and just strangled him to death. And I'd probably take this a step further, but someone stupid enough to probably report the thing I just thought of saying. Anyway, he goes into this racist rant, and I just sit there and listen to it. And when he finishes, I asked him if he was done, and that if he would please leave the car. And which he did. But what was funny is, he didn't know what to do, because he wasn't, my assumption is most of the interactions he has with people, when he gets like that, they sink to his level, and it's just a yelling match that just escalates and escalates and escalates. Well, that wasn't happening. He was attempting to escalate the situation, and I would just look at him deadpan, and just calmly say, "Will you get out of the car, please?" It's just kind of like one of those things. And it wasn't working. He wasn't getting me mad. It was just making him more upset. So he was like, "Fine, rah, rah," and just slammed the door as hard as he could. And then I drove off. So I let Uber know what happened, and they basically, long story short here, they basically said, "Your account looks good. We'll probably end up suspending this guy." That's going to do it for us this week, everyone. Thanks for listening to Ready Said Podcast. Please give us a like on our Facebook page. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Spreaker. We're on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, CastBox, and anywhere you may find your podcasts. Except for, Mixcloud and Stitcher. I haven't put the podcast up there for some reason. This is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Thanks again, you fucks. We'll see you next week, and have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Ready Set Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and look for us on our YouTube channel. Ready Set Podcast.